and welcome to AJ Paints. I'm Andy. In this episode we'll be painting the Malagaunt, an unnamed necromancer of incredible power who's the main antagonist in the core box campaign. This is the one who keeps sending all those horrible creatures against you while your adventurers are trying to loot the dungeon. We'll have a look at the best way to get this character quickly onto the table. A lot of the work here is done in our undercoat, and the three colours we're using here are all blues. We're starting off, as I often do, with dark sea blue, a lovely desaturated greenish blue as our base coat. I'm dry brushing this on really heavily. Our mid-tone is Thunderhawk Blue from Citadel, another desaturated blue, a little bit lighter this time. We're going for the tops of the bits of the character here and a little bit focusing on the left-hand side. With that done, I'm brushing on the top of the head, the top of the shoulder with a pale blue, really looking to build up a gradient of colours, imagining that there's a light shining down on the top left hand side of the character, picking out his face and giving us some good shadows. That pale blue on its own isn't really bright enough, so for the brightest areas, the face and the top of the shoulders, I'm using a pure white. And that is the base coat done. You could easily stop there and move straight into the next step, which is our contrast paints and colours, but I'm going to focus a little bit on the magic potions that he's got on his belt and paint a small amount of light work on there. Using a bright white paint, I'm picking out all the areas which would be lit up by the glowing potions, under his sleeves and the inside of the staff, and of course the potions themselves. This unnamed necromancer has bright white hair, so I'm going to use that white on his hair as well, and also pick out some lighter areas on the face, chin, nose. Makes it easier when I'm adding the skin colour later on. Extra white done, that base coat is fully complete, and we're ready for the next stage, getting it tabletop ready with some contrast paints. I like to work from the original artwork, but in this case it's quite dull, quite grey, and I want to make my miniature look more interesting. So putting it into Photoshop and turning the saturation up helps me to pick out some of the colours which I can focus on. So it looks like the main clothing that he's wearing is that sort of turquoise colour. He's got those sort of bone coloured trousers, dark leather boots, there's a book, you can see the glowing potions there, and then the cloak that he's got wrapped around him is a swampy sort of a green colour. So starting with the cloak, and I'm using Plague Bearer Flesh for this, and I'm watering it down 1 to 1, just in a normal palette, and applying it carefully to make sure that I don't spill on into areas that I don't want this colour. It's a nice big area to paint, so it's relatively simple. Next I'll pick out the small areas of skin using Guilliman Flesh. The first time I tried this I watered it down quite a lot. I wanted his skin to be really pale, and this is watered down, but it didn't really have a great effect, so later on in the video you'll see I reapplied this flesh colour a little bit more strongly to give me a better skin tone. I decided on a greyish blue for the clothes rather than the turquoise that I picked out using Photoshop, and mixing Apothecary White and Celestian Blue helps out with that. The Apothecary White is a slightly more opaque paint, so it helps to lighten up or desaturate that blue, and you can see here brushing it onto those areas of cloth. And for the wrist wrappings I'm using Apothecary White, just neat. As it's a more opaque colour, it goes on nicely over that base coat. To get the rough cloth colour on the trousers, I'm mixing Guilliman Flesh and Skeleton Horde. This is roughly a 1-to-1 mix, and it gives us a really nice colour. For the boots, I'm using snakebite leather for these upper areas, and I've already painted the toe sections using the light blue mix that I used on the cloth before. The main wooden section of the staff is pure skeleton bone. This gives us a nice light wooden finish. For these pointy bits on the top, I'm using Guilliman Flesh just to give a contrast to the bone colour that I've already used on the staff, and going back over the face and the hands, as I said earlier, to just give that flesh a little bit more of a warm tone and make it stand out. Then finally on the staff, I'm using a red colour, Blood Angels Red this one. It's a very, very strong, very highly pigmented contrast paint, and it's really easy to pick out all the ribbons and wrappings around the staff. As always in my paint schemes, I like to leave points where you can just stop, and this is certainly one of those. There's no need to really take it on any further. The miniature looks great. Stick a base on it, varnish it up, it'll be fine. But in this case, I'm going to look at adding some magical colours, and these two blues are going to be good for that. The Ducat/Ducat blue is the one that I'm starting with, picking out the potion bottles, and then also painting in some of the areas where the light would splash onto. I'm just gradually working out from the centre point where the potions are, and you can see here picking out light areas on the edge of his spell book that he's got hanging on his belt. Now moving into the lighter colour, that's the lighter pale pastel blue, and working just on the potion bottles and mixing a little bit eventually of the Ducat blue in just to blend out in between those two. This is another optional step, and that is painting in the eyes, using ivory here, holding my breath, pointy brush, and hoping for the best. When you're done, go with whatever your standard base scheme is. I always use P3 Ironhold Grey so as to not detract from the miniatures and also to blend in with whatever the base matte is that I'm using. I normally take probably 3 or 4 coats of this. I go on quite thin because I'd like to have my finish as smooth as possible, and you can see here brushing on my first finish. It looks quite patchy, but once it's had a couple of layers it looks good. You can certainly see the patchiness coming through as I'm going around the rim of the base here, but again, once that's been gone over a couple of times, you get a nice smooth finish. I don't leave a lot of drying time between these coats, in fact virtually no time at all. By the time I've gone round the base rim all the way once, it's pretty much time to start again. While I had that P3 Ironhold Grey on my brush, I thought I'd just tidy up his hair. The shadow on that side of his head was looking a bit dark, so I painted in a couple of strands so as to not have such a stark shadow there. Again, another optional step. One thing contrast paints can leave is a bit of a satin finish. That's something I really don't like, so AK Ultra Matte Varnish is an absolute favourite for me. Throw it all over, don't be too careful with it, just get a good coat of it all over the miniature, all over the base, and it'll give you a fantastic flat finish. And that is our miniature complete. In this episode I've not spent any extra time adding extra highlights, shadows, working in, painting in things like the stitching on the back of his cloak. I just thought it really wasn't necessary. It looks good, it's not on the table that often, and I'm really happy with the finish on this one. The underpainting we did at the beginning has done lots of work for us, and we've got some great shadows. Anyway, as always, if you've got this far, I thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you next time.